All right, welcome everyone to a new episode of the Roscoe's Wetsuit podcast. To start us off with the real lyric of the day, this is from Kanye West's 2008 album Graduation, from the song Good Morning. So he says, the third verse goes, Good morning, look at the valedictorian, scared of the future while I hop in the DeLorean, scared to face the world, complacent career student. Some people graduate but be still stupid. They tell you read this, eat this, don't look around, just peep this, preach this, teach us, Jesus. Okay, look up now, they done stole your streetness. After all of that, you received this. I was actually back in high school. That was the first or the first two lines of that. The good morning, look at the valedictorian, scared of the future while I hop in the DeLorean. Those were that was my yearbook quote back in high school. But anyway, today or tonight I am joined with my uncle Howie Bierbaum. Howie is a really interesting guy. He has actually been a tour manager for the internationally renowned band Pink Martini for 7.5 years. And before that, he was for 3.5 years. He was a co-founder of the Wonder Ballroom, a music venue right in Portland.
Yes, 800 seat or 800 capacity music venue that we opened in 2005, and I managed for the first 3.5 years. I was one of the partners in the building, and I managed the business for the first 3.5 years.
Gotcha. And that's actually kind of almost kind of what I wanted to start with, as far as, you know, the entrepreneurship aspect of things and, how, I guess your decision, why did you originally want to start Wonder Ballroom and can you just talk a little about how that ball kind of got rolling and became more of a reality?
Sure. I was approached in 2004, a building in Northeast Portland, a former, it'd been a lot of things, but it was originally in 1913, it was built and opened as a Hibernian Hall, which was a fraternal community center for Irish immigrants who 100 years ago were the persecuted group of the day, along with Jews and Italians and Eastern Europeans, who we now seem to totally embrace. So 100 years makes a big difference. Anyway, it became open. We heard through the grapevine it was open on the market and for a ridiculously low price. And me and two partners crunched numbers, saw the potential of it as a music/community space venue, went through the trouble of penciling out whether it should be a nonprofit music venue or community space or whatever we wanted it to be as a nonprofit, which would lower the overall cost of renovating the building versus a commercial for-profit business specializing in national music acts with a bent towards some community and local activities. One of my partners was Chris Monlux, who is one half of Monkey Presents, which is a big rock pop promoter in the Northwest for about the last 35 years. So he was an instrumental player in directing how we should go. He had experience opening venues and running venues in the past. And I had worked at one of his venues in the 90s called La Luna, which was in Southeast Portland, a larger room with two spaces, a small balcony stage and a main stage that probably held closer to 900 or 1,000. So we bought the building and wrestled with the idea of profit or nonprofit, came up with for-profit, and then spent a lot of money upgrading it and making it a commercial space. We opened in June of 2005, hosted national acts. I don't know if you'd know any of them. There were so many: Feist, Ray LaMontagne, mid-sized 1,000-seat acts at the time. And It's still running to this day. It's been in operation for 14 and a half years. And I left after about 3.5 because the music business will chew you up if you let it.
Mm,
Kind of
interesting. Uh,
endless, especially when you're a manager or if you have a hot property, be it an act or a venue. It's just a lot to keep it going. And the job basically was consuming upwards of 65 hours a week. And a lot of it was nighttime hours. So I'd work during the day. And then at night, I'd be there with loud, crowded rock shows. So I was
right.
just, the day, end of the night, usually 1 a.m. So, yeah, I mean, it was great doing it. I had also, prior to that, worked front of house management for the Les Schwab Amphitheater in Bend, which hosted really big acts like Willie Nelson and Jack Johnson, stuff like that, acts like that, bigger acts. And that venue held about 7,500. And I did all the front of house management, which was taking care of the vendors, the food, the beer, just monitoring and accounting for all the money, thousands upon thousands of dollars every night.
Hmm.
And which is always good. It's always good to have an accounting background when you're doing business and not being afraid of cash. A lot. I work now in a at as the executive director of the Saturday market, and some of my, this is not ageist, some of my younger people that work for me are a little intimidated when they see a stack of, $4,000 in 20s because they don't really deal with cash much. It's more of a card world for them. And so they're a little intimidated counting large sums of money, but I jump right in and I have for years. It's kind of what it is. Um, so yeah, the Wonder Ballroom was a great
Yeah.
experience. What I would say, people always ask me, well, how did you fall into that? I've had a really diverse career. Very few of my friends, I'm 61 and I graduated college 1980. Very few of my friends have, as opposed to people your grandparents' age, have stayed with one employer their whole lives. And I never envisioned myself working for a corporation or a company for
Hmm.
years. Oh, my plan was to go around and explore different aspects of arts and entertainment. So, and that's what I've done. So for the past 30 odd years, I've been doing theater, solo performance, dance, venue management, artist management to a certain degree, and some artist agent work. And it's turned out to be an interesting ride. I've done a little of everything in
Yeah,
terms of the arts.
that's
Well,
awesome.
support
Yeah.
celebrating artists. It's been really, really a fun ride, exhausting at times, but pretty fun. So I recommend people when they start out in the arts, um, work hard, volunteer, network, get yourself a good reputation as a hard worker and someone who's honest and reliable, and doors will open up. And treat people fairly. Don't be a dick,
Hmm.
and you can.
Related
That's
related
kind of
to Yeah, I mean related to that stuff, I'm curious as far as, going back to with Wonder Ballroom when you chose to actually make the decision to go in with that, and you had the business partners in mind. Were those people whose character you kind of, you were sure they were solid, and how did you kind of go about, seeing
Yeah, well,
really good
I had
people?
done them both. Portland is what, 650,000 people now, plus, probably a million or two, 1.2 or 2 million in the region. But Portland's still a small town, and I've been in Portland since '81, and I knew both guys. So I had worked with one of them before, and the other one I had known. He was a gallery owner, and I knew him for years. So I had no trepidation in joining forces with them. And it's a business. I ran the books for the most part. I took care of when we renovated the ballroom because it needed about $700,000 worth of upgrades to be um, an 800 capacity room. So we had to
Mm.
sprinkler it. We had a lot of work to do to make it viable as a performance venue. So I ended up being kind of not the project manager, but kind of the project business manager. I didn't hire the contractors and I didn't direct the schedule. I just kind of paid the bills and had an overview of what was going on and all this. And there was a lot going on. There's a lot of people and a lot of hands involved when it comes time to renovating a building because it was a 100-year-old. It needed a lot of work. It needed all new plumbing, all new electrical, obviously a lot of electrical. It was a rundown, old, funky building that we cleaned up. So I learned a lot about construction and renovation through there, met a lot of people, and we opened on time. And so, yeah, I mean, there's sleazy people in every business in terms of you got to trust your gut with every business transaction you do or any transaction you do in life. And I felt good about these guys. And it turned out to be a really good adventure. I would never do it again. I would never run a music venue because it's kind of endless. There's just so many people working in a music venue, like, you know, just to run the music venue between the bartender, security, and cleaning crew, you're dealing with like 30 plus people that you have to manage. And it's kind of tiresome, but I liked it. I mean, I always wanted to do it and I got to do it. And I did it for 3.5 years. And when I finally threw in the towel, just because I was completely exhausted, I was turning 50 and I couldn't see myself continuing at that pace of 65 hours a week for the near future. I just stopped. I just gave him a long notice and eased out and didn't know what I was doing next. And within a couple of days, I got a phone call from Pink Martini because I'd known the band for years. And we had done some club stuff together in the 90s. And so I fell into that job and became a tour manager, not knowing what a tour manager actually did. So
Right. I got one more question for you as far as back with Wonder Ballroom. Like when you were, so who was you know, you were talking about the decision as far as whether it should be a nonprofit or whether you guys should go the business route, the for-profit route. And I mean, it seems like a huge decision. Was there a lot of like talk as far as, you know, or people switching sides? How did that play out?
Well, there were a couple of factors. Being a nonprofit meant we would have lower occupancy. It would probably, because we didn't have to put as much work into it. So it would probably have been like a 300 or 400 capacity venue, which kind of ruled out up and coming acts. You know, room that's about 800 means you're catching them on the way up or you're catching them on the way down, as far as the access, because that's kind of a mid-sized room at best. Not really. It's kind of a smallish room. So you're catching emerging artists or artists who were once bigger and are on the slide. You know, the next stop will be a casino or at Lincoln City, Oregon. You know what I'm talking about. It's just kind of, that's kind of the arc some careers have. And sometimes when you're dubbed a casino act, it's really hard to get back into major rooms, but casinos pay well. So that's another career arc you can kind of ride out for a while. But with getting back to Wonder, when we decided to make it a for-profit, when we kicked around being a for-profit or non-profit, we talked to our attorney. We wrote down the pros and cons of being a non-profit versus a for-profit, and ultimately determined with one of our partners' connections to the pop music world, it would pencil out quicker and be more profitable if we went and spent the extra money and turned it into an 800-seat room for popular, but not ignoring community fundraisers and other things we could do. So we could kind of have the best of both worlds,
right?
But actually make a buck while we're at it. So I know people in the dance community were bummed because we had the room was at one point a basketball court. It was a big
I think I kind of remember that.
You remember that?
In the early days, I feel like we
you were probably, oh boy, 5 years old.
Right.
But Yeah, it was a basketball court for a bunch of years, and so the dance community was really interested in it because isn't a lot of really nice sprung hardwood floors in Portland. And so when we ended up becoming more of a for-profit and kind of monetarily precluded a bunch of the smaller local dance companies, they were bummed and they let me know about it because I had a history in the dance
Mm.
community and the nonprofit performing arts world, both small and mid-sized. And I felt bad about it, but I also realized, hey, I'm hitting 50. I got to make some money.
Right.
So, yeah, it was a mixed blessing to have a room that big, but it turned out it was the right move to do because it's now 14 plus years later and it's still in existence and still thriving. It has a better sound system and it attracts, uh, national acts. It's got a good reputation in terms of being a venue that people want to play because venues around the country, both as a tour manager and as someone who booked acts at the Wonder, if you have a crappy room, the word gets out and the agents hear about it and don't want to play it. So you have to make sure you have comfortable dressing rooms and a good sound system and a reasonably friendly crew to succeed as a venue. The
Right.
location is important, and we built that reputation up over time. And
Yeah, I was
so,
gonna say it must have been, I mean, especially when you didn't have a reputation when you first started it, that must have been especially important to make sure that, the crowd was happy, that the artists were, happy with what they were getting, I'm assuming, like in order to build what you had built, over that 3.5 years, right?
well, it looked good when we first opened, but I remember Ray LaMontagne. Do you know who he is?
No.
Singer-songwriter. Uh,
Okay.
he hated the room and told his agent, and it was a major agent. So we had to up our game and improve the sound system over time. Uh, it was just not it was a dated sound system, an old board, and it was just we didn't have the capital to put in $100,000 sound system, and we kind of rented a cheaper one, and the word got out, so we quickly upped our game and made the room better over time. So, the artists talk, and when I was a tour manager, um, if I didn't like a venue, either the sound or how we were treated, or even the catering, I always told our agent this was kind of an unfortunate day when you're traveling and I knew this retroactively when you're traveling as a touring artist, and I was a tour manager. You wake up and you're in another city. You want to have good food in a comfortable, friendly environment. You don't want to go into a janky, half-assed room with crappy food because you're trapped in a room all day working. You want all the pieces of the puzzle to work well together. So I think we did
Mhm.
that well here. And if I were ever to go back to be a venue manager, I'd be even more sensitive to the needs of the touring artists because I've been on the receiving end. So
Yeah, I was almost gonna like make I just kind of made that connection as far as like, do you think like when because you had alluded to once you started as a tour manager for Pink Martini, were there things from Wonder where you sort of realized, okay, this is what the artists want, this is what works, so that you could actually provide those same kind of services or quality that the band was wanting? Did you
yeah,
feel
uh,
that there was some carryover in the skills?
well, as the manager of Wonder, I saw the artist's contracts often, as well as their rider. And for the listeners out there who don't know what a rider is, basically it details what the artist wants. They want vegetarian food.
Mm.
They want wild caught salmon. They don't want
Huh.
farm salmon. And it can be as particular as you want it to be. And I'm sure people can go online and look up
Huh.
crazy riders from artists.
I take it the bigger the artist, the more leeway they get as far as the rider.
You do not mess around with a major act with the
You
rider.
just give them
Provided,
whatever.
I mean, basically, when you sign that contract, you're signing off on the rider. The time to negotiate the rider is before you sign the contract.
So
So
they
when
can just ask whatever they want once it's
uh,
signed.
I mean, I was pretty loose when I was a tour manager. If they, we had at Pink Martini's rider, we had, you could either give us a catered dinner of, say, chicken, fish, vegetarian, blah, 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 salad, dessert, I personally am not a big dessert eater, so I never went crazy about particular desserts. I was just like a cookie and brownie tray is fine with me because
Hmm.
I didn't care. Some artists want, tiramisu or whatever, let them have it, or chocolate mousse. We never went that far. Um, but we also, some artists, and Pink Martini was included, the tour manager, when they do the advance with the venue, can say from experience, because maybe you've been to the venue before and the food was crappy, we'll just take $35 a person and we'll eat on our own. We'll eat in a restaurant. So I was always pretty liberal with Pink Martini, knowing like if you're in a crappy town in Iowa, no offense to anyone in Iowa, but if you're in a crappy part of the country, and there are lots of crappy parts of this country or the world, uh, you might want to just opt for cash and then forge on your own. It's more interesting usually to seek out restaurants in a neighborhood anyway. But sometimes you're just too tired. There's not enough time. You just want to be catered to literally and figuratively. So it just
Right.
depends. But
Yeah.
I open a venue again, I would be even more mindful of being kind and not generous, accurate in meeting the needs of the artist, because it's really hard touring.
Uh-huh.
It's a real grind, and we really want to make it easy on them when they're in the venue. So
Uh-huh. I was gonna ask about that as far as like what were kind of the biggest challenges you encountered as far as when you actually were out on the road touring.
let's see. Anxiety was one, because you're on a tight schedule. So what happens is you're given, let's say, we would go out anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, typically 4 weeks, because really with a band the size of Pink Martini, which is roughly, with the bus drivers, the support crew, and the band itself, which is roughly 13 people, you're talking about 20 people on the road. So a day off costs the band, or the quote unquote the company, a lot of money, because that's
Hmm.
hotels and
Right.
food per diem. So you got to really maximize your time on the road. So hold on,
And
it's sliding.
can I just interrupt you real quick? So you were in charge of deciding like the as far as the budget of what money can get allotted to what, whether it's the hotel or food. Is that the
Well,
company
here's the
sort of put
thing.
you in charge of that, or is that not how your
Not really.
position was?
Basically, you're given. So let's say we did 5 shows a week, and we're out for a month. So it's about 20, 22 shows in a month. Um, I had a good relationship with the agent as well as the manager of Pink Martini. They would send me the preliminary schedule and make sure I thought it was doable. Like, sometimes you're in Buffalo and the next New York, upstate New York, and the next day you're in Columbus, Ohio. Can you drive overnight and get there in a reasonable amount of time, allowing for breaks and everything else? So you can actually load in at 1 o'clock and have a show at 8 o'clock. So they'd run everything by me, and then I would, go and look at uh, the Google Maps and see how long it took at 55 miles an hour to get somewhere. And if it was too tight, I'd say, "Ooh, that's a little rough, but I guess we can do it." And sometimes you get into town late and you just scramble and slap the show together. But my
Hmm.
job was basically, I was given the itinerary, the details of each gig, whether we had to buy the hotel rooms or they were provided, and then I had to review every hotel to make sure it was up to snuff. The catering, review the rider, if it's going to be a dinner buyout or if we're going to pick menus, stuff like that. Every basically, when you're tour manager, and I didn't know this, I had never been a tour manager. When I took the gig, the former tour manager loaded me up with some show files and basic information, gave me some pointers. But basically, I went to the bookstore and bought a book on how to be a tour manager. I had no idea how to do it, and the
Huh.
first tour was rough, the first week or two, and then I started figuring out where you can get hustled by the bus drivers, for extra money, because there's overdrives. I mean, it's a whole different world. And
Yeah.
after the first tour, I was very savvy. I saw where the pratfalls were, where the band could lose money. And I got tighter with the purse. I tightened things up, and it worked out really well.
Well, that's
Um,
interesting that you. I hadn't thought about that, and that's interesting to hear about you buying a book as far as trying to figure that out, because that seems kind of like it. I would assume that a major, because at that point they were weren't they were still, or they were at that point like internationally renowned, like they're a pretty big
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When
deal.
I came on board, I
Yeah,
started with Pink Martini in '08. I mean, they had been on the Tonight Show, Letterman,
yeah.
late with Conan when he was on NBC,
So
NPR, about,
what
international for sure.
yeah. So how do you think, or what did they see in you that you think that they, even though you didn't have experience, being like a tour manager for a smaller band, but obviously they saw something that, you know, how he's going to be the right guy for the job. You think it was
That's
just
what
kind of
happened.
that hustle, the
Well, so what happened was when I left my job at Wonder Ballroom in the Willamette Week, which is a local alternative weekly, they had like a little murmurs column, a little gossip column, and someone planted. I didn't. Someone planted the item that I was leaving the Wonder Ballroom. Was one of the
uh,
founders, creators. I was leaving after 3.5 years. It was just a little 3-line snippet. Someone in the Pink Martini office saw that and said, "Oh, we just lost our tour manager. Let's call Howie." And the band leader, Thomas Lauderdale, I've known for years. I knew him since '94. So, and we always overlapped and worked together on stuff. So he called me and said, "I want you to be my tour manager." I'm like, "I don't know how to tour manage." He goes, "You'll figure it out. Money is no object." So when you're
uh,
given an offer like that, I took it. I thought that's. I was a little late in life to be tour managing. I was 50. It's better to start when you're in your 30s. And what I recommend people do if you want to go on the road and be a touring person, work your way up. Start, if you have a propensity towards sounder lights, go for it. But start by try to work in a venue first, being selling tickets, selling merch, working in a bar, whatever. Immerse yourself in the scene at a venue, a pop music venue, and then like people I know, believe it or not, And then there's licensing if your song is used in a TV show or a movie. So there's still ways for artists or writers, musicians to make money besides touring. It's just that the sale of music, CDs, LPs, whatever it was, digital downloads was so big that
Yeah.
that's a huge chunk out of your income. I mean, if there's a song I like, I go to YouTube and look it up and listen
Right.
to, and you can do that too. You can do playlists on YouTube. So
Yeah.
it's really, it's going to change again. I don't know where it's going to lead, but I'll tell you, ticket prices will keep going up, you
Hmm.
know, because artists are going to just need to make the same or more money. Ticket prices will continue to rise, and
Hmm.
people will continue to pay it because really it is a unique experience, and you can't get the experience of being in a communal situation with live music in front of you except that that one night you're there, and every night is different. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious, as far as with what you've noticed with just the music industry, the entertainment industry, how are, we talked about, kind of Instagram and SoundCloud, kind of these newer platforms that people kind of can gain exposure on. But how are, as a new artist who's actually trying to turn a profit, would you kind of point them in the direction of, more, focusing on the branding so they can really, sell a lot of merch and, you know, touring? I mean, it seems like you have to almost, now that we know this about, not being able to make money selling CDs, you gotta completely, reshape the way, you're going about trying to build a following for yourself as an artist.
yeah, I don't know how people. I mean, I didn't build Pink Martini as a brand. I came aboard when they were, at the pinnacle, and I rode that wave for 7.5 years, and they're still, they just did 3 nights at the Hollywood Bowl, and so they're still riding high. I don't, and they were marketed initially to an NPR crowd. That's how they got their
Mm,
fan base. So they had an educated, well-heeled crowd, the NPR crowd. That was their angle for getting national and then ultimately international fame. A local artist, like, the thing I always tell people is there's only so many nights and so many stages for the talent in the country. A venue has 365 nights a year. They don't want to fill all of them anyway, so they probably want to fill 250. That's 250 artists are competing for, where are you in Florida? Let's say the Jackie Gleason Theater in Miami. 200, there's 250, 300 slots a year for that venue, and artists are all competing for that slot. So, and that's established artists because it's a major room. I don't
mm-hmm.
know how emerging artists struggle and claw their way to get notoriety, but my hunch is playing in local clubs is great to get you the experience as a live performer. But I'm thinking Instagram, YouTube, and all the other platforms, SoundCloud, putting your music out there is what's really gonna launch somebody,
Right.
and that's hard. I've never built an act on the way up. I built a venue, but I've never built an artist on the way up.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting note. I'm
Do you know
curious, like,
you know anyone who has?
who's built someone.
That's a skill. I mean, my
Yeah.
stepbrother manages Cheryl Crow and Gary Clark. Excuse me. But for those two, he's been with Cheryl Crow for 35 years. But for those two, he's tried to launch other artists that just never took off. So
Mm, interesting.
that that's the challenge there.
Right. I wanted to ask you kind of more of a kind of big picture thing as far as, your career and what you've been able to do. Um, on a few podcasts ago, I interviewed one of my friends who I used to write for the Emerald with, the University of Oregon student newspaper, and he's now actually doing an internship with the Wall Street Journal. And basically, this past summer, he was working with a couple other co-authors on this article that was basically focused on kind of exposing these debt repayment scams, these companies that are popping up that basically are, saying, oh, we'll pay back your college debt, you know, uh, or we'll take away a good chunk of it or whatever.
Mhm.
And pretty much, the conclusion of all that research and their investigations into it, it's like those companies really can't offer anything that the government can. Like they're just, basically complete scams. And I mean, we had a good, dialogue going as far as, just as far as, you know, with the raising kind of costs of tuition, whether some people, may be dissuaded, now from going into certain professions because we see, especially the graduate degrees, how much money they are. And, I'm curious as far as with your path, with like how much do you think you applied? Because you have your bachelor's, right? Did
Bachelor's
you go
BA in telecommunications with a minor in visual art.
and you didn't go into like a master's program at any point, right?
I dabbled with it, and I was so sick of school. I just said I I did some graduate classes, but I didn't want to pursue a graduate degree. I
Right.
just didn't do school anymore. And so I just got scrappy, lived lean, and dabbled, acted in shows. In college, I had 20 hours a week of work study, and sometimes one time I'd be with a lawyer in her
Mm.
office, which I had no interest. I had no interest in legal stuff, and she knew I didn't, and was not happy that I was the one that got picked to be her assistant. But so be it. She's dead now anyway. It doesn't matter. Uh, but most times, what I did for my work study, I would work in the theater box office, um, build sets. I would just do whatever I could do on the side. At the University of Oregon, I both built sets, and I worked in the box office, and those were all really helpful. That was a good plus of having work study, was I got to dabble in arts administration or
Hmm.
some form of it. Uh, and then when I left college and graduated, I started, when I moved to Portland in '81, I started slowly immersing myself in arts and getting a hustle together. I had a line of postcards. I did a line of postcards for about, I don't know, 5 years. Um, a line of novelty earrings with a partner. We had a hustle on stuff, and we made a living, modest living, doing our stuff. And then I started migrating towards theater, and then from that, I landed a job as the general manager of a dance theater space in Southeast Portland, the Echo Theater. That led to being the executive director of the Portland Area Theater Alliance, which was a support organization for theater companies. And I took that job and I ran with it and created Portland's first half price Dave show ticket outlet for shows, and ran that for about 3 or 4 years. And then I just started bouncing around different nonprofit arts groups. I constantly got hired, and my reputation was solid enough. So I
So
managed chamber orchestras, choirs, and then I ended up at the Wonder, and now I'm back managing the I'm executive director of the Portland Saturday Market, which is again supporting and celebrating local artists. So I've always kind of stayed in that support or celebration or producing artists. And then I had my
mhm.
own production company since 1987, where I presented national acts that it was entrepreneurial. My own money. I produced performing artists, singers, comedians, some of whom made it big, and I did. I would still do it occasionally. I haven't done one in a couple of years. 2 years ago, I produced Ari Shapiro from NPR's All Things
Mm,
Considered in his one-man
mm.
cabaret show. But I'm so busy now, I don't really dabble much with the impresario part of my life. But if the right act comes along, I certainly will.
Right. So when you look back on it now, do you think you'd be able to do what you do and have gotten where you are if you didn't go to college, or do you think you
You know,
actually
I
did
think
learn skills that?
if I wanted to be strictly in the music world, like a touring musician or working in a venue,
Hmm.
I think just like banging it out, selling tickets, working in a club, I could probably have achieved the same thing. I could not, without my degree, have gained entree into the nonprofit arts world, being an executive director of a nonprofit. There's no way I'd get my foot in the door.
Sure.
So, because I went back and forth between the for-profit pop entertainment world and the nonprofit arts world. I keep going back and forth, and I don't think I could have done the nonprofit world without an education behind me. I just don't think I would have even been eligible to apply for the job. And
Mm.
that's a BA right now. A lot of the nonprofit jobs I'm seeing, they want masters preferred, BA mandatory. Back when I was
Mm.
doing these mid-sized and small nonprofits, it was a BA. They didn't even ask for a master's, but now they're asking for masters. And so I know how expensive it is to go to school now. When I went to school, it was cheap, but in the state university system, but the times have changed. I mean, when I went to school, it was about $1,000 a year for tuition. So
Hmm.
you could leave school without debt, and then you could, you know, experiment and poke around and see what you like. Now you're leaving school with some people leaving school with 50 grand in debt. You got to get a
Right.
job.
Right. Yeah, and that's what we had talked about. I mean, it's crazy to me that, especially, I mean, working, I can't imagine that, I don't know what you would be doing for a nonprofit with a master's degree, but I mean, could you imagine spending all of that money to get the master's degree and then you choose to, I mean, maybe honorable work, helping the community with the nonprofit, but that's, how are you ever going to pay off a master's degree? It seems like it's gotten to
Yeah.
a point where it's like, you really have to really, really think hard whether, I guess, a degree is going to get you to the point where you're trying to get to, or if you can somehow navigate there without it.
Well, I have friends that graduated college in 93 that are still paying off their student loans and hardly making a dent in it.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
that was back then when, I mean, how much was tuition then?
I think they racked up like 25,000, half as much as the typical one now. Uh,
Right.
Typical
Yeah. That's
debt load now. It's really, I mean, it's a different world which shapes, you know, uh, the economy. What's the word? The economy forces you to make choices as an individual. Well, when I was experimenting and doing stuff in the arts in Portland in the 80s, getting my feet wet, getting experience, I'm back.
there you go. All right, sweet.
Sorry, I'm popular. When I was doing shows back in the 80s and 90s, I didn't have student debt. My overhead was low. So I was allowed to kind of lightly experiment with stuff and get my feet wet in terms of honing my skills for how to put on a show and how to do lighting. And I don't think I could do it now. I think I'd have to be. I know I can't because I have people that work for me that are in their 30s that have to work full-time jobs because they have student loans, or one of them did the option of working for a nonprofit for 10 years to erase her student debt.
Oh, okay.
So she's taking, I think she has a master's. I should look at her resume one more time. But she wanted to make sure we were an Oregon nonprofit because she's on, I think, year 9. and so she sticks with us or another nonprofit for another year or two, her student debt is erased, which is awesome. I didn't know that was an option. I don't know if it's still
Yeah,
available.
I never heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah, wherever she went, I don't know if it's a federal thing or if it was something for the university she went to, but the fact that she could um, work for a nonprofit for 10 years and erase her debt, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
if that was the case when I was in my 20s or 30s, I would have done work for nonprofit theater companies. Even, my first job was $5 an hour managing the Echo Theater in Southeast Portland. This was in 1987. But my rent was $250 a month, so I could kind of make it work. But I had to have side hustles. But um, if I had student debt on top of it that I had to pay off, I don't know how I'd do it. I don't know.
Mm,
I would be a different person and have a different career path for sure. There's no
mm,
way I would have had the luxury of bouncing around and not being beholden to a big paycheck because I have debt. I was able to live kind of cheaply and experiment and find my own path. And it's harder and harder now, especially in major cities. Those opportunities are dwindling at best.
mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I mean it seems especially, I mean, since so many of the jobs that you'd want to get are requiring, it seems like more and more, degrees, higher and higher education, but at the same time, often, not really making up for it in terms of the salary. It's like, I wonder if we're going to see a change in, say the number of doctors or lawyers, like the medical or legal fields, which require these advanced degrees, or people know, that they're going to be stuck with, a certain amount of debt. And it's like, I feel like people are going to start to really look harder at those because I feel like those are, well respected jobs, that, you know, it seems like, parents are definitely going to encourage their kids to, become a doctor or lawyer or something. But then, when you think about it, it's like, is that even a financially savvy move anymore? I mean, because you have to be pretty confident that at least you'd be very good at that job and be able to do whatever, your private practice or something in order to end up making it pay off. But you're you're kind of taking a gamble, it seems like there.
Well,
If
when
you're
you're a
not
doctor,
able to pay it off, you're
yeah, if when you're a doctor or a dentist or anything like that, you're in it for the long haul because you're spending
right.
so much money. But I question if you're going to get a master's in social work. You know, even if you get an 80 grand a year job and you got a huge debt, because I don't really know this for a fact, but isn't it like as the more you make, the more you pay, the more your debt load is, you have to pay it back faster, or do they give you a set amount to pay back monthly? I have no idea.
I'm on a monthly payment thing.
Yeah, regardless of how much you're making, you got to pay it back. It's like a mortgage.
Right. Yeah, I think they do some kind of hardship thing, if you are not able to pay that back, but obviously I don't know if there's repercussions for that. I was seeing I'd actually just watched this. I think it was like a CBS News or ABC. It was like a short video the other day. It was about, a college. I forgot what it was. Green Green Mountain State or something. Some college, I think in North Carolina that recently shut down, and it was basically, because um, in large part, they had a very high tuition, but what they were actually getting from students was so little. I think the tuition was like something like 32 grand, but they were saying the average student only actually paid them, like 10 or 12 grand a year. So it's like they're, assuming that, I guess, through the government that the kids are going to be able to pay off all that debt, but in the end, the college they, they were losing money, that they closed doors because of that. So I think it's not only changing the game for students and prospective students, but also just the colleges, the institutions of higher education.
Yeah, I think this is unsustainable, and I also think it impacts. probably not pop music as much, but it impacts theater because uh, and other forms of and classical music and other forms of nonprofit and fine arts, let's say, because they don't traditionally pay that well. But the cost to getting your foot in the door with an education that you'll need to put on your resume to even apply for the job is going to be so imbalanced that I don't know how much longer it can be sustained. And I'm just fortunate I got out of school with, I think, $2,000 in debt, maybe. I mean, I worked summers. It was a different ball game back then. I worked summers and I worked 20 hours a week work study. And my parents paid the $1,000 a year tuition, and I was able to leave with minimal debt. The room and
Mm.
board and books and mad money, as they say, was enough to. I mean, I incurred very little debt, and it really allowed me to experiment with how I wanted to approach my career in arts and entertainment. And if I graduated today, it would be a different world. I would not be happy
Yeah.
because I
No, and
wouldn't
I
be
mean
able.
it,
I'd miss opportunities.
right. No, and I mean it seems like the experimentation with different sort of career options, just doing different things that wouldn't really be possible if say you did go like the med school route or something where you're committing for, you know, I think, what, 10 years or something, with all the internships and,
Yep.
you know, shadowing and stuff. It's like you don't get to, I mean, you could back out of it, but then you're even in a worse spot, it seems like, because then your little experiment just cost you, 100 grand or something. Whereas,
Yep.
if you backed out of med school, whereas, if as you're saying, you kind of take on, a much lighter debt and then just kind of, you're doing jobs that aren't going to make as much as, you know, a doctor, but at the same time, you're kind of building up your experience, figuring out how you can eventually like do entrepreneurial things and actually, make that kind of money, right? Without having to take on that sort of level of, that rigorous kind of academic path and education and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad I ended. I'd never had a really strong career path. I just kind of bounced along and found opportunities that were intriguing and lucked out and got the jobs. And I mean, I think there's been 6 months out of my entire career where I didn't have work and I was a little freaked out.
Mm.
But I just, I've left jobs and people are like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. And then I
Just
find
figure
them.
it out.
Yeah, but people are like, you're leaving your job with no prospects. I'm like, no, I'll find something. And I always
Yeah,
did.
that that does seem like a scary kind of proposition or thing to think about. Like for me to do that, yeah, that I mean, because when I left college, I had that job that was already lined up. The job in
Hmm.
Seattle where I had already signed the contract before spring break. So I feel like I've always, you know, to some degree or another, always kind of uh, methodically like thought things through a little bit, like had the next move planned. But yeah, that's gutsy to just you know, just
I've
quit
done it a bunch
quit
of
the job,
times.
find the next
Like,
thing. But
yeah, I did it though. I've done it a bunch of times since I've been in my 30s. I just, when the job doesn't feel right and I feel like it's time to move on for whatever reason, like one of my old factors used to be if I know what I'm doing April 10th next year at this time, I don't want this job. If it's that become that rote and that mechanical that it's like there's no new challenges or surprises or possibilities, then I'm like, I got to get out of this job. And that's usually when I quit. Or if there's a change in how things are going and I don't agree in the direction things are going, I respectfully resign.
mm-hmm.
Now, I don't have student debt, so I always have a little cushion of money to fall back on. If I had student debt that I had to pay back every month, I didn't have as much money in the bank because I have the student debt, that would probably change my focus. But I've been fortunate enough to basically walk away and fall into something else within the, you know, days, weeks, or months. And I've never been on the edge financially. And I've always ended up finding jobs I wanted. I also feel like when you have a job, you don't have time to look for another job. And
Mm,
sometimes the best thing to do is to leave the job. So you're forced to find the job you need.
mhm.
That's kind of a little luxurious in terms of saying I'm going to cut off all income until I get something I want. But that's how I played it,
Right.
and it's worked out well for me in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, I can
I
see.
do
I
it
mean,
again.
yeah.
I got one more. I think I have one more job in me. I don't know how I'm 61. I don't know if I'm going to work till I'm 66 or 70. I don't know. Depends on my health and if right now I have a quote unquote 9 to 5 job. That's kind of hard for me because I'm so used to working in music venues where I'll go in at like 10, leave at 3, come back at 6. I never minded working nights. I never mind working weekends. 9 to 5 is kind of like the death knell for me. And so now I'm in a mostly 9 to 5 job, and that's proven very challenging, like getting up at 7, making a sandwich, going to work. It's not really the most joyful thing, but the job itself is rewarding. It's supporting 200 plus artisans in the metro area, the Portland metro area. But the office side of it, the the 9 to 5, you're doing it now. It's challenging. It's just kind of like someone said to me, it's really hard for single people to own a house, have a full-time job, and get all their stuff done. Like, when do you have time to exercise? When do you have time to grocery shop? When do you have time to do your yard work? You're working 40 hours a week, and I'm realizing that now. It's really hard to have some downtime because there's always stuff to do on my days off. So there's really not a
Yes.
whole lot to
I can
redo
definitely
that.
relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
But it used to be that the dad worked 40 hours a week, made enough money to support a family. But those days are long gone, long gone.
Yeah.
It's experiment. But I'm still glad I chose the path I did. I've met amazing people. I've worked with amazing artists. I've had really fun times that could not be replicated in any other career choice. I've had pretty amazing ride, and and it's not working with celebrities. I don't care about any of that. Celebrity is who cares? They're just another person. They got lucky. Yeah, Lauren Bacall, who was an old movie actress, and she would just live in New York and walk into the deli and get her food, you know, like anyone else who lives in New York. But she said fame is an accident, and that's how I always felt about people who are famous. They got lucky. They had a good accident, as it were. Doesn't make them better or more amazing. They just got lucky because there's talented people that never make it. And so I'm happy for that I've had the chance to work with famous people. And but there's been more to it than that. It's just been really fun to put on shows and put on events that are successful and that people really appreciate and really want to come to. So I've been really lucky to
Right.
be part of that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think you've had a really cool journey, and thanks for, sharing that tonight. So I
Absolutely.
think
And I
it's a
encourage
good,
people who want to go into arts and entertainment to talk to professionals in the field. And if you really want to do it, if you're a hard worker and you're honest and you show up on time and have a good disposition and people want to work with you, you can definitely start working in clubs and work your way up and if you want to be in the music business, immerse yourself in the music business. There are opportunities. Um, you just have to work your way up from the bottom up or know somebody. But
awesome.
all successes, and I'll leave you with this. All successes, I always think what makes a successful person in any field is being reliable, right?
Hmm.
And um, able to build relationships because that's business. It's transactional. So, having a good reputation and having good relationships will take you far. And I can't say I regret anything I've ever done. I've had a really good run in my career, and I'm happy I've got to be a part of the arts and entertainment world.
Great. Is there anywhere do you want to direct people as far as if they want to find either Pink Martini or Wonder Ballroom, or I don't know. It's your chance to, if you want to plug anything.
There's portlandsaturdaymarket.com, of which I'm
There you go.
currently the director. There's one you can check out. We're the largest and longest running open air crafts and artisan market in the country, currently in our 46th year. And you can check out wonderballroom.com. That's the room I helped create back in 2005. What else is there? And pinkmartini.com if you want to check out the band and see where they're playing. And pretty much where they're playing is where I've been with them. They kind of every 2 years play the same circuit. And so you can see where the band's been and where I was. I mean, and what else? Those are the major places I've worked that I'm
Cool.
proud of. And I kind of, you know, and always with almost every job, except with the exception of one. When I'm interviewed for jobs, and this might be an interview tip, maybe you can just roll your eyes and not even worry about it. But when people ask, what do you hope to bring to the job? I always say, and I mean this earnestly, and I feel like I always do accomplish it. I want to, like a Boy Scout, I want to leave this position and this organization or this group better than I found it. And if you can really take that to heart and really make that work for you, you'll go far, because it's not a canned answer. I mean, it's something you should strive for in your life, and you should really, any endeavor you do, make it better, make yourself better in the process, and leave it better.
Awesome. Awesome.
That's
Sweet.
my
Well,
philosophy.
yeah, yeah, Howie, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And if you do want to, follow us on Instagram, Roscoe's Wetsuit Podcast. Also, make sure to like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. It's also or the YouTube channel is just Roscoe's Wetsuit. So there's gonna be new videos, new episodes every week. So make sure to stay tuned. All right. Thanks again, Howie.
Thanks for talking to me. Talk to you
All
soon.
right.